Welcome back to Firmer Ground from SRM, where we explore trends and strategies impacting the current and future state of financial institutions in North America and across the globe. This is Neil Doherty, host of today's podcast and Managing Director of Global Marketing at SRM. Every episode features perspectives from the world of banking and financial services, including thought leaders here at SRM, executives at future-thinking financial institutions, and other experts from all corners of the industry. In today's podcast, I speak with author, keynote speaker, and customer experience expert Steven Van Belleghem on the unique ways established corporations can think like startups. Please enjoy the conversation and let us know what topics you'd like to hear about on the next podcast. Well, hi, everyone. This is Neil Doherty, Managing Director of Global Marketing at SRM, and my guest today in our studio is Steve Van Belleghem. And Steve is a customer experience enthusiast, an author, a global keynote speaker, and the co-founder of Nexxworks, a disruptive startup helping corporations thrive through out-of-the-box thinking and a heightened focus on the customer experience, which I'm really excited to learn a little bit more about today in terms of both the history and what's happening today at Nexxworks. Steven's also an International Advisory Board member for SRM and typically providing a lot of great insights to help our company meet our aggressive growth goals, both here in North America and globally. He's also a devoted husband, father, a supporter of Club Bruges, the recently crowned champions of Belgium's top football league. Soccer to most of us Americans, but football to Steven. And so a very hearty congratulations on that. And I know your team is also in the Euros right now and still looking to move on. So exciting stuff there. And so as you can already tell, Steven is a lot of things, and he's extremely generous with his time. We're happy to have him today. And I'm excited to speak to him briefly about his endeavors with Nexxworks, a few tips on how financial institutions can bring startup thinking back into the boardroom and find ways to implement it across the customer and member experience. So welcome, Steven. How are you?
Hey, Neil. I'm fine. Thank you. And thank you for the very warm introduction. It's great to be here.
Oh, you're welcome. You're welcome. And for anyone who can't see Steven, he's got his CX Superman t-shirt on today. So very, very, very excited to learn more from the man who speaks a lot and knows a lot about customer experience in many different frames. So let's just get right into it, Steve, if that's cool. So my first question is just, if you would, tell us a little bit about Nexxworks and specifically why you started that venture.
Well, we started Nexxworks in 2014. I was one of the co-founders. The other founder is Peter Hinsen, who has a similar profile than mine, but he's more speaking and doing research on disruptive innovation and technology, where I'm more the customer guy. And we got a lot of questions from companies who asked us for more in-depth inspiration. And then Peter and me, as some sort of a side project, we decided to organize an inspiration journey to Silicon Valley back in 2012. That was before Nexxworks started. And we launched this in our Belgian network. It was a big hype. A lot of people joined us. The first group who joined us actually created a company together, a startup together, because the excitement was so immense. And it became some sort of a hype in Belgium. Like every business person wanted to be part of our tour. So we did more and more and more. And suddenly we got this request from a big telco who said, we want to take our top 200 people. We want to take them to Silicon Valley. Can you guys organize that for us? And now we said, this is no longer a side project. This is becoming a real business. So then 2 years later, in 2014, we started Nexxworks. Today, Nexxworks is helping companies to get ready for the day after tomorrow. We organize learning expeditions, inspiration trips. We organize local in-company experiences to inspire people to think differently around different topics, from customer experience to disruption, working with China, things that are a little bit, sometimes far off in compared to your day-to-day. And Peter and me gave the keys to the company to a young couple, Matthias and Eileen. They're our co-CEOs right now. They run the team, they run the operation, and Peter and me are part of the board. We're supportive. We're moderators of tours. We speak on Nexxworks events. But it has become a growing, mature company now, and we have corporate clients from all over the world that ask us to inspire their leadership teams.
Wow, that's really interesting. And so let me just double check something. Did I hear the first thing that you mentioned was that first group that you put the experience together for, they ended up kind of coming together and forming a company, but they didn't know each other or had no intention to do that at first. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. So some of them knew each other, of course, but we had a group of 25 people. And I remember that last evening, one of these guys, he was the CEO of a utilities company here in Belgium, and he gave a little speech and he said, look, guys, let's be honest, we're all CEOs of these big companies. We saw a lot of cool things this week. We're only going to be able to implement like a minority of that. So I think if we really want to work with these ideas, we need to start a new company with this group. Who wants to join me? And everyone raised their hand. So we raised a little bit of money, everyone 2,500 euros on the table. So we had like 75,000 or so. And we used that money to start a company and to come up with a concept because we didn't have a clue what we were going to do. We created some subgroups and suddenly we had the idea to launch a wearable to give to senior people to help them to stay longer in their own house and don't go to like a retirement place. This was before Apple Watches and stuff came out, right? So we raised more money. We raised 500,000 with that group. We started our first concept. That became news in Belgium. And then suddenly, almost every entrepreneur from Belgium wanted to be part of that journey. So we raised more money. And we had, I think, 70 to 80 small investors, all CEOs and entrepreneurs from Belgium joining into that venture. At the end, we created the product. We had first customers, but we completely underestimated how difficult it was to create both hardware and software at the same time. So we were slow. We weren't fast enough. And by the time we went to market, we got competition from a little company called Apple that launched an Apple Watch. So we were able to sell our company to a company that works with senior citizens and said we can work with that. So we managed to get our money back. It wasn't a big hit, but it was a big adventure. And it was something that has never been done in Belgium before. So we're super proud of that journey.
That's really neat. I mean, talk about blue sky thinking and just starting from scratch. And, the fact that people were so inspired to just write that in there and commit to something. That's a really cool story. And I think it's also a good segue, right? Because you mentioned the fact that one of the gentlemen who was part of that was from a larger company, and said kind of, well, we can only do so much here. What are we going to do? Right. Mm-hmm. So a question that I'm always curious about, and I wanted to get your take on it is, what are the objections that you hear from executives when you speak with corporate executives, right, around bringing startup thinking back into their corporation? Like, what are some of the modern day 2024 challenges of, an executive being able to execute on that type of startup thinking again and trying to sort of, loosen what's been very, tight for some times in terms of how they think, how they approach problems, how they operate. I'm just curious, like, what you hear and how that's overcome at times.
I see two main roadblocks. One is that they don't master the art of keeping things small anymore. Every problem becomes something big, becomes something strategic, becomes this huge project that asks for a lot of resources, a lot of money, a lot of time of the team, and it takes forever to implement. A lot of the big organizations have forgotten that the accumulation of 50 small things may have a bigger impact than one giant project, and they don't master the art of keeping things small. That's one thing. The other thing is that I call that the 95-5% rule. They focus too much on the 5% customers that have bad intentions or are unrespectful or they don't pay the bills or whatever you do, it's never good enough for them. And it's negative energy and that spins in your mind. And after a while, you start to think that 5% annoying customers equals the average customer. And then a human thing pops up. Then you want to protect yourself against that 5%. And by doing so, what you're actually doing is you're installing new rules and procedures, but you're actually lowering the service levels towards the 95%. And the 5% is still annoying. So you didn't solve that. You just lowered your service levels. And a lot of big organizations have this whole set of rules and procedures that are created to protect themselves against the 5%. And because of that, they have become very complex, both internally, but also externally to work with.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I love just the concept around, trying to keep things small where you can, right? Whether it's, just a new project or an initiative or what have you. That's really interesting. And it leads me to, obviously, as our typical audience is going to be a leader and executive from a bank or a credit union here in North America. And it seems to me that I don't want to leave the witness here, but do you consider the credit union or a bank a good candidate for the approach that you typically suggest, or is it harder for them typically to go down that path and kind of revisit the way that they think about customer member experience, or the way that they can bring that kind of startup thinking back into their business?
Well, especially when you look to my field, Neil, customer experience, I personally believe that every organization can really become more customer centric without too many changes, without too many investments. It's more about mindset and the micro decisions you make every single day. And this is something that, in my opinion, seems to be very easy, but I see that in organizations, this is very, very difficult. And it has a lot to do with the leaders. And I'm not just looking at senior leadership. I'm looking at everyone with a leadership position in an organization, like everyone who's on a crossroad and can decide what he or she blocks and decides what he or she passes through. And, changing the mindset among those leaders, that is what you need to do. And I've worked with a couple of banks. Like in Belgium, I worked with KBC, which is seen as one of the most innovative banks in the world. They have the happiest customers in Belgium. I think they're an example of a bank that completely reinvented themselves by removing frictions for customers. That's how they started. They have probably one of the best banking apps in the world as well. So that's a big project. But they started by removing small frictions, hundreds of them in the course of 2-3 years. And they even had this wall in their main building, in their headquarters, where they had the wall of previous frustrations. They had like signs on the walls for every small frustration they solved. And the accumulation of all these small things made their customers extremely, extremely happy with their service.
And it's such an interesting thing, right? Because you think about the way that in some sense, businesses tend to overcomplicate their goals, right? And it sounds to me like that was a pretty simple goal, and it sounds like they expressed it, right? Which is that we want to make our customers the happiest banking customers, right? And that's a simple goal, but obviously a difficult, kind of end game to get there, right? It's not easy to remove those frictions. And, I wonder, as we talk about this particular industry, what do you think are some of the biggest areas of potential when it comes to banks, credit unions, any kind of financial institution or financial services company, better aligning to their customers' needs? What do you think are some of those hot button opportunities or potentials, areas of potential, if you will, for companies in this industry?
I think that the people who work in the banking and financial industry underestimate the emotions that happen with consumers when they deal with a bank. For a bank, every transaction is routine. I mean, you have all these people coming in for a mortgage. It's like the most normal thing in the world. But for the customer, very often this is a once-in-a-lifetime thing that is probably linked to their biggest investment ever and linked to buying a house, which is the most emotional part of your family. So for the bank, it's routine. For me as the customer, it's a unique moment that carries a lot of weight, a lot of emotions, a lot of fear, sometimes a lot of excitement. And if you understand that, then you can adapt your behavior and communication to that moment. Today, it's too transactional, and everyone is focusing on optimizing the customer journey, which is great. The better the transaction, the better the journey, the happier the customer. But that's pure focusing on the transactional part. There's this whole layer of emotions that come with it that create an opportunity to get some sort of deep loyalty, a deep relationship with your customer. And I think this is an opportunity that banks sometimes miss out on. Like when you get your loan to buy a house, for instance, and let's say you have to pay for 20 years before the house is actually yours. There are two important moments for the consumer. It's the moment that they get the loan, and usually the bank understands that is an important moment. So it's easy to add some positive emotion to that. The second moment that is crucial for those customers is the moment of the last down payment, when you are finally for 100% the owner of that house. Usually there's 20 years in between. But what do banks do at the end, at the transition of that journey? Most of the time the answer is they don't do anything. They just let it pass by, or they write this extremely boring letter to say, well, this was your last down payment. Congratulations.
Right.
Or they send in a salesperson saying you have more money available now. You want to invest some money with us. But they don't celebrate the moment with their customer. And the moment that you understand that, that last down payment is a moment of celebration and you do something with that, then you add that emotional layer. And that's where I see a lot of potential.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting. You mentioned something, and it occurred to me too. There's sort of a level of kind of fear and anxiety, I think, in a lot of customers' minds when it comes to just managing their own, financial life, right? And choosing, who and when and how to manage that. So it's interesting because you've almost brought in this sort of kind of psychological element, right? When it comes to the training the people that, work for your institution and really having them be capable of managing those types of emotions. And, I'm just curious, do you run into that much in terms of like trying to help companies think through, how they, kind of set their workforce up for success when it comes to those types of things and how they can improve the experience by improving kind of the training and knowledge of the people that are part of that experience. Does that make sense?
It does. And I think there's a big opportunity there. I see a lot of companies who don't even consider this. And the moment that you do, then it becomes relatively easy. You have your customer journey, what everyone has. But if you add a second journey, I call it the life journey. If you add the life journey to your strategy, to your thinking, there is about understanding like the movie that everyone has in the back of their mind of their life, with the dreams and the fears and all those emotions. The better you understand that, the more value you can bring in the life of your customers. And a company that don't just focuses on the customer journey, but also on the life journey can very easily train employees to say, look, these are crucial moments for us in a relationship with a customer. This is how we react. This is what we do. But you cannot expect your workforce to understand that. You cannot expect them to do the right thing all the time. Some people have this by nature. The top of the bell curve. Some people have an enormous amount of empathy. They feel and understand this, and they communicate in such a way that customers feel very comfortable, that customers feel very, very relaxed and valued. You have people on the other side that totally don't have that, and they are terrible to work with. You have to keep them away as far as possible from your customers. But you have this large majority of your bell curve that has a potential to do it, but they don't think like this. That's the group that you have to take by the hand and say, look, these are important moments. This is how we're going to react. This is what you can do. Be open to these situations and know that this can bring value to a customer. That's pretty easy to do. But the leadership team needs to be aware of that opportunity and take that or include that in the customer strategy that they build.
Mm-hmm. So I'm going to ask the question that you're probably sick of hearing, but given that we just talked about that, there's a little bit of kind of psychological and emotional awareness. And yet, in every boardroom across every country in the world, they're putting AI in as a major priority for their business, whether it's through the idea of operational efficiency or something else, right? So, how does the the kind of inevitability of AI compete with what we just talked about, which is the fact that you still need to have that sort of human, emotional intelligence and kind of equivalent to be there? Do you think that AI is going to make that challenge even harder, or is the experience potentially worse, or do you see that as kind of an opportunity where you can bring both things together? I'm just curious how you see that playing into some of the things that we were talking about before.
I think it's going to improve the whole thing for us, and you're absolutely right, Neil. Most companies now focus on the productivity gain that you can get by implementing AI, making the team more productive, increasing efficiency, increasing bottom line. Basically, that's going to be the quick win for AI for a lot of organizations. Which is fine if you can optimize your whole economic model. That's great. If you can speed up things, that is fantastic. But there's also part of AI that will increase empathy. There are already studies out where they ask consumers to talk both with a human service agent and with a chatbot, and that the chatbot wins in terms of quality plus in terms of empathy. Which has a lot to do with time restraints. If you call a contact center, if you talk with a salesperson, they're all under immense time pressure because there's always another person waiting. We have more and more customers. We have less and less time. So the time per customer is under pressure. AI has unlimited time. You can talk with 1 million people at the same time, and you can talk with them for an hour it has a zero marginal cost. So a lot of people are super excited about that. The empathy levels in the conversations are also pretty good. Some people ask me the question, then, Steven, this is programmed empathy. Are people open to that? I can tell you, I've been testing this. I've been doing research about this for 10 years. And there's a whole different attitude today towards programmed empathy than 10 years ago. 10 years ago, people said, I prefer, no empathy over programmed. Today, it's 90-10. 90% of people are very open to programmed empathy and prefer a friendly machine over an unfriendly human. But the number one thing that people still like most is authentic empathy. It is being helped by an extraordinary human in the right situation. So that's the extra layer on top of it. You don't always want that human to add empathy in everything that you do. Let's take the insurance industry maybe as an example. Imagine that you have a small minor accident with your car and there's a little bit of damage. What you want to do is you want to take a picture of that, send that through your insurance company, and everything else happens automatically. The AI takes care of it and you get the money on your account, one day later, and problem is fixed. So you don't want emotion there. But the moment that you're in a really bad car crash and a lot of people are severely injured, or maybe even worse, someone passed away because of that accident, at that moment, you really long for authentic empathy. Or when something happens in your house and you have a little bit of damage, you want convenience. When your house burns down, you don't want to talk to a chatbot. You want to have authentic empathy. So what we're going to see is that the amount of human interactions for most companies will be less than 1% real soon. Like in the banking world, it's already less than 1%, but this is going to, continue to evolve like that. Which means that the humans that will have to do the human interaction, the kind of challenges and the kind of questions that they get will be completely different than what they used to. It will be more about emotional issues, very important things, very complex things. So you will have to train them completely different. No time restraints. The channel is up to the customer. Maybe you will go to the people's houses even in certain situations. So AI and humans will work together, but it will require complete reskilling of a lot of the customer-facing professions that we have. But if we do that, there's a lot of value for humans on top of the efficiency of AI.
Right. I mean, it goes back to that question I asked, which is, are they investing in kind of those skills? And I mean, the way that you explain it, you're talking about someone who may need to be, as good or potentially as accredited as a psychologist might be, right? Managing those types of situations. So that's really an interesting take. And I think you shared some interesting data in terms of the kind of studies and the progression of that. And I think we see that, right, in general from an acceptance standpoint. But I felt that I needed to ask the question just because exactly what you just said, which is that there are some things that are, kind of transactional in nature. There are other things that are going to be, very kind of challenging from a emotional and kind of, logical standpoint.
So, and it is the number one discussion and debate right now in every organization in the world. So it's super relevant to discuss this topic.
Yeah, and we're excited. I mean, you may have seen, but we just announced that we have a new advisory service and capability for banks and credit unions, really just to get them, set up from an infrastructure standpoint to start having thinking about policy and kind of both the sort of near, mid, and long-term impact of bringing that on, and then obviously helping them from a tech standpoint at some point. Cool. So a lot of good stuff happening there. Wanted to pivot real quick and just ask you, first of all, congratulations. You have a new book out titled A Diamond in the Rough, and obviously great to see you put forth another awesome read.
Thank you.
And I was just curious, what was the inspiration for this latest work, and who do you think it will benefit the most from, who the people that read it, like who stands to benefit the most from A Diamond in the Rough?
Thank you for that question. It's my 6th book on customer experience, and my 5 previous ones were all based on scientific research. They were about the future. They were about complex topics like AI and humans. It was about social media back in the days. And now I wanted to write a book based on the number one question that I get from customers. And that is, we love your books, but how do we implement this? And, I've been in this field of customer centricity, customer service for almost 24 years now. I've seen hundreds, maybe thousands of companies, talked with people all over the world. And what I wanted to do with this book, the Diamond in the Rough, is share my personal opinion, share my personal experience of what I've learned in those 24 years, of what I've seen that works and what I saw that didn't work in organizations. And I wanted to make it as practical and tangible as possible, with one goal: to inspire companies around the world to act in a more customer-centric way, not by spending more money, but just by changing their mindset. So it's my belief, if you take this book and you read it, that at least 10, 15 concrete ideas will pop up that you can start to use the day after you've read the book. That was my goal with this story.
That's awesome. So it's fair to say that anyone in any role in the organization can benefit from that, because it's about idea generation and committing to those ideas. Is that fair to say?
It is. And not everyone works with external clients. You have sales, marketing, service. For them, it's obvious to read these tips and to work with it. But, I could just take the manuscript of the book and do a find, replace, and replace customer with associate or employee or team member, and the same principles would work. So you might as well use this if you're an HR responsible. You may as well use this if you're running the IT department and you work with internal clients, because the story is based on basic human needs and basic human expectations in a relationship. You could even, and some people think this is a little bit far stretched, but you can even use this philosophy in your personal relationships and your romantic relationships, because it's based on what do people expect in a relationship. I wrote it in a customer supplier kind of way, but you can easily rewrite it with all these different kind of relationships out there.
Oh, that's really cool. So I'm curious, you said that it sounded like you changed your process maybe a hair for this one because you had previously done a lot of research, but was this one easier or more difficult to write in the end, both in terms of kind of time and process?
It wasn't the hardest one for me to write. I have this fixed structure. When I make a book, I start with a PowerPoint presentation. I do a number of tryouts with that story, and I see if it resonates or not. And if I feel that I've got something, then I start in Word, and I start to make a structure, chapters, examples, and then I leave it there for 2 months. 2 months later, I take a new Word file, empty page, white page, do that process all over again, see how my ideas evolve, and then I compare it with what I had. And I do that 4 or 5 times. It's a process of a year. And once I'm done after that year, I have a Word file of about 20 pages with the structure, the different examples, the theory, the facts and figures that I need. And when that's finished, then I start the writing. And then the writing itself for me goes very fluently. I'm an easy writer. I'm very good at that. I think personally, the story is in my mind, and I just have to get it out there on paper. And that's the easy part. The research phase for me is the hard work.
For sure. Well, that's exciting. And again, congratulations. And
thank you.
To see more appearances for you as it relates to the book as well as Nexxworks. So I have one kind of last question. I think it's a good one to ask as sort of a takeaway from our conversation, which is, in your mind, what do you think are the top 3 customer experience priorities that executives should be taking seriously to maintain their position in 24, going into 25, thinking about the next 5 years out, just, kind of looking at it that way? Is there sort of a top 3, top 5, whatever the number is,
sure.
right? Are there things that kind of, come to mind and you say, these are things that if you walked into any boardroom right now as a guest speaker, that you would really, accentuate for them in that conversation?
Well, I would start by letting them think about becoming a partner in life, and what we just discussed. Go beyond the transactional part and understand increase your empathy level to understand what the challenges are of your customers. The better you understand those, the more value you can bring in their life. So become a partner in life. Go beyond the transaction. Like if you're in real estate, it's not just about selling this one house. It's about, a young couple that are looking for their first home. Then they make a little bit of money. They want a bigger home. Then they have some more money. They want to do some investments. Then their parents pass away. They get the house of their parents. So there are so many things happening in the course of a life. If you're a partner in life, you create some sort of a deep loyalty because you show you understand how things evolve. That's the first one. I think today there's a priority to discuss AI in customer service. You cannot go around that. You need to know how you will use it, what your vision is, what the first use cases are, and try to do something that brings value as soon as possible to your market. Don't just focus on the efficiency part, but try to use AI to create value for the market.
Mm-hmm.
And the third one is I always recommend boardrooms to start friction hunting. And that sounds really tactical, but create a culture where people look for small details in the relationship with the customer, where you waste the time of your customer, where you make things too complex, where you create friction, and identify those friction points, keep them small so you can really target them, and then create this culture of ongoing friction hunting to increase the overall quality of your transactional relationship with the customer.
Now, that's really interesting. The third one especially, I think, is true today as it was, 10 years ago, will be in the future, is looking for those points of friction. And I would imagine like figuring out a way to create a culture where friction hunting is effectively kind of rewarded, right? Or recognized. I think in some organizations that's not the case, right? But it sounds to me like, part of that, the ability to do that is sort of the cultural change to encourage, teams across the board, to be looking for that. And I'm curious, do you see that as a roadblock at times? That's something that has to be kind of learned and cultivated over time?
It for me, it's the most simple thing in the world, friction hunting, but I see that it's so difficult for organizations. Again, it's the art of keeping things small. I did a workshop last week with an organization about friction hunting, and then one of the outcomes was, our invoicing process is a friction. That's a big thing, your invoicing process. So then I asked them, just list the 7 or 10 small frictions, the details. And then amongst those 7, look for the 3 that are easy to solve. Start with those. And sometimes when you have something more complex, don't go instantly for the 100% solution, but just take some chunks and just say, okay, what is the first step so we can improve it for 20%? And that was the next one. There's often a focus on big things. We want to solve it for 100%. And it creates a lot of frustration and negative energy. If you make it smaller and you create a rhythm, you create a culture of success. It's win after win, and you create positive energy.
So really kind of stacking those smaller wins versus the idea of trying to do everything at once at 100 miles per hour. Well, I think this has been super insightful, and I thank you so much for joining us. I know your time was valuable. I know it took us a while to get this on the books because you're a busy guy, but appreciate your time.
Pleasure.
Really enjoy talking through these topics. I think just kind of getting a glimpse inside your world and a lot of what you talk about and things that you're focused on is awesome. And I would encourage anyone who's interested in learning more about Steven's work to visit his website. It's www, and I'm going to spell it out, StevenVanBelleghem.com, StevenVanBelleghem.com. Or you can search his name on YouTube, subscribe to his channel. There's a lot of great content on YouTube. I love your videos.
Thank you.
Do a great job.
Thank you.
On the regular, of course. And, just kind of, he has a lot of information on the latest customer experience and business content up there. There's always a unique set of guests as well. So I would certainly recommend that folks check that out on YouTube. And otherwise, we hope to have you on again. I know there will be something else that will pop up and there'll be a time for us to talk, but just wanted to kind of keep it succinct today and appreciate your time. And didn't know if there was anything else that you wanted to share, but we'll be putting this up on our podcast.
No, fantastic. Thanks for the invitation. It's a pleasure to talk with you and the people who are listening, and always looking forward to coming back. And congratulations on all the great work that you're doing at SRM. I'm really enjoying our meetings at the International Advisory Board every year, and I'm super impressed with the quality of your work and the growth of your organization. It's a pleasure to be a little bit part of your beautiful journey. So happy to be here in this podcast.
Wow, we appreciate that, and it's the folks that make it up and the diversity of our group now that's really making our business move forward. And so really exciting things. But again, thank you, and best of luck to Nexxworks. Best of luck with the books. I'm sure you probably have another one planned in your mind. So who knows when that one will be out. But I again recommend that folks check out A Diamond in the Rough by Steven. And otherwise, we'll talk to you next time. So thanks again, Steven.
Thank you, Neil.
Be well. Thanks for listening to Firmer Ground from SRM. Please stay tuned for more new podcasts in 2024 featuring guests from across the globe. And until then, you can visit us at srmcorp.com or on LinkedIn, X, and YouTube.